They're in the bag to these big corporations already. They wouldn't even get to the convention if they didn't have that money from those big corporations. So what we got is what the Honorable Senator Pettigrew said when he resigned from the Senate in 1898, a government of the corporations, by the corporations, for the corporations. And Lincoln's dream of a government of the people, by the people, for the is a noble dream, and I'd love to see it realized, but we don't have anything remotely like that. When the people can't even make their own laws through the initiative process anymore, the last straw of democracy has been destroyed.
Now, you say the ideals have been lost, or the ideas in the Declaration of Independence. Do you think that freedom in America compares unfavorably to, say, freedom 40 or 50 years ago?
Oh, very definitely. 40 or 50 years ago, even at the height of the McCarthy era, I think if Joe McCarthy got on television and said, I have a urine test for communism and I want everybody to give urine samples where they work so we can find the communists, that would have been the end of his career. The idea of forcing Americans to empty the contents of their bladder to government inspectors. Even Kafka never came up with a satire on totalitarianism as absurd as that. Now the American people have been so conditioned to czarist-type government for so long that, yeah, sure, we'll give you a urine sample. Do you want a hair sample? Do you want a blood sample? Do you want my fingerprints? Somebody wrote a book with this title, A Nation of Sheep. They'll accept any crap the government hands them. And if you quote the Constitution at them, they think you're a red. Or worse.
You've been involved in the civil rights movement since at least the early 60s. Can you talk about what that was like and what you're continuing to do today?
That was the only time I ever got busted. After a life of subversive activities and thought crime and heresy of all sorts, I got busted for trespassing in a barber shop.
How did that occur?
Well, we were trying to persuade the barber to desegregate, and he didn't want to desegregate, and so we had a series of sit-ins. And I got busted in one of the sit-ins.
This was Ohio?
Yeah, Yellow Springs, Ohio. It's a very interesting feeling when you're under arrest. It's just like when you get drafted. You suddenly realize your body doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the government. They can do anything they want with you now that you're under arrest. As a matter of fact, if one of them wanted to pull out a gun and shoot me, probably three of the others would swear in court that I was resisting arrest. Happens all the time. A regular practice. It's a really creepy feeling. I think I was a philosophical anarchist before I was arrested, and after I was arrested, I was an emotional anarchist.
What do you perceive as the greatest threat to our freedom?
The stupidity of the population. As Schiller said, against stupidity, the gods themselves contend in vain.
Do you feel that the American population is more stupid in some way than any other population, or?
Well, in lots of ways. In Europe, the owners, the capitalists, the entrepreneurs, the managers, they all believe the more intelligent the workers, the better their work will be. So they believe in giving good educations even to the working class. In this country, the capitalists seem to believe the stupider the population is, the easier it is to manipulate them. So why waste time by trying to educate them? And there's been a deliberate dumbing down since the 60s. I was every decade I see more college graduates who don't seem to know. They not only don't know anything, they don't even suspect anything. Fortunately, Internet is working in the opposite direction.
I wanted to ask you about that. You know, many people claim that technology is going to, you know, especially the Internet and computers, are going to be used to enslave us in some horrible way. And you hear an equal number of people arguing just the opposite, that it's bringing about all these new types of freedom or new vistas of freedom. How do you feel about that?
Well, to take it by a curious path, when I was working on my historical novels, my wife used to collect old encyclopedias. Every time she was in a bookstore that had a set of old encyclopedias, she'd buy it. So we had about 8 different sets of encyclopedias in the house. So every time I wanted to look up a historical detail, I'd look it up in 3 or 4 of the encyclopedias, and always it didn't take as much as 3. Usually only 2 I'd find a disagreement. If I went through all 8 encyclopedias, I'd find 8 different. Like how old was Mozart when he wrote his first symphony? He was either 7 or 8, depending on which encyclopedia you look in. How tall was the Bastille? 90 feet, 100 feet, or 120 feet, according to 3 encyclopedias I consulted. This is what provoked me to what I call Wilson's 22nd law. Certitude belongs exclusively to those who only own one encyclopedia. If you own more than one, you begin to encounter a certain amount of doubt and uncertainty about things in general. More and more people are doing research on internet. I wrote an article a few months ago in which I didn't open a single book. All the research I had to do, I did on the web, on the world. Everything I wanted was on the World Wide Web. That certainly wasn't true 10 years ago when I first got online. I did a whole article without once leaving the computer. Everything I want to look up, I just go to the World Wide Web and I could find it pretty fast. So more and more people are doing research on the web. And the one thing you find out when you do research on the web is what you find out if you own 8 encyclopedias, which is that there's no one reliable source. There are a dozen different sources all claiming to be reliable. And then you've got to use your own ingenious mind and your own talent for analysis and skepticism to try to figure out which one of these guys really sounds like he might know what he's talking about, or which one should I bet on. Husserl says every active perception should be regarded as a gamble. And from the experiments I've done and the experiments I've led in my workshops and seminars, that has become overwhelmingly obvious and true to me. Every perception is a gamble. Just think you're walking down the street in a big city. You see a face half a block away. If you think it's a friend of yours, you get a little closer, it's a total stranger. All perception operates on gambles. You pick up a few details, you fill in the rest. And if the guy never comes any closer, you're not sure whether you saw an old friend or somebody who just looked a little bit like an old friend.
How does that relate directly to our political freedom, though?
The main trouble with Marxist parties is they think that Das Kapital has all the answers in it. The major problem with the United States is that about 50% of the population at least thinks the Bible has all the answers in it. And then there are libertarians who think Ludwig von Mises has all the answers. Except for the ones who think Ayn Rand has all the answers. If you think there's one book that has the answers, you're never going to really discover anything, and you're never going to think an original thought. If you find out there's 12 books with different answers, you're almost forced to start thinking. So I feel Internet is forcing more and more people to do something they've never done in their lives before, which is try to make an independent judgment, how to judge between alternatives.
We've mainly been talking about American politics. What about world politics right now? How do you see that going?
Well, I think the East-West conflict is being replaced by a North-South conflict. I think more and more